Are coming up. Next, we'll be speaking with IBM Vice Chairman Gary Cohn. There you are, Gary. Gary, I have a feeling you've been coming to the World Economic Forum more than 2 years.
Yeah, it's got another digit in it, at least.
Ooh.
Might start with a 2.
It might start with a 2.
Might start with a 2.
Can we start there? What is different this year? How would you describe the vibe? I ran into one of your former colleagues at Goldman, and the word he used was wacky. And I'm wondering if you would agree with that.
We'll go with wacky. Not my word.
What's your word?
No, look, I think I got to look at who I'm going to insult out there. So, look, when I started first coming to Davos, this was really the place where I would say corporate world and government met. It was sort of the safe zone. In fact, the big meeting I used to come to when I was running Goldman, there was a head of banks meeting, which the 50 largest banks in the world with all of the treasury secretaries and all of the central bankers. We got together once a year, and it was in Davos.
Is that right? Huh?
Yeah, that's how this started decades ago. And it has turned into much more of a current business model trend. And I think, right after COVID, we saw the entire cryptocurrency world descend upon Davos. And I think that was one of the big changes. So, that year, I forgot, what was it, 23? Every storefront you walk down here was some crypto place. This year, it's some .ai. So what Davos has become in many respects is less of a intersection of government and business. I think it's become much more of an intersection of business and business.
That's really interesting. Axios met with your current boss, the IBM CEO, Arvind Krishna. He had some really nice things to say about you. Not that I'm surprised.
So don't believe him.
Nope. He said that he's learned a lot from you. He said that you guys talk almost every day, lengthy phone calls. He wants you in the room when he has to make a big decision. What have you learned from him?
I've learned technology. I went to IBM as a failment at retirement. So I thought I had retired. I was done 2 careers, and thought I was done in the working world. Arvind convinced me when he became chairman and CEO of IBM to come in and work with him and partner with him and trying to drive a vision, drive a strategy, drive a company. First thing I said to him was, Arvind, I have trouble using my cell phone. So you should not.
It's better now, I'm sure.
My kids still think I'm incompetent. I said, I do not know technology. He goes, I got you there. I know technology. I'm not sure I know how to run a big business as well, or I haven't run a big business before the way you have. So it's been a really fascinating marriage of a brilliant technologist in Arvind, a guy who knows the company cold, which is a 350,000 person organization. It was bigger at that time. We sold off a division. It was close to 500,000 people at the time. He understood the culture of IBM, what it was, and in a very complimentary way, he understood that the culture of IBM was probably not the culture that was going to allow them to thrive for the next generation. So Arvind was willing to be a change maker in that area. And I think, what the reason we're talking every day, is we were talking about the cultural issues. How do we take an organization that's 100+ years old, that was a monopoly at one point, that was broken up by the Department of Justice because of monopoly powers, and how do you make that a highly competitive business in an area where our competition is really, really, really strong and growing exponentially?
One of the things he said that he's learned from you is to always engage. And I wonder, how would you take that advice or apply that advice to this current moment, the Trump 2.0 era? And maybe even more specifically, how do you think about that advice with respect to AI?
Yeah, look, I think the most important leadership quality is to listen and engage. And I think listening is a skill that we suffer from in this world today. We are not good listeners. And in fact, there's many times when I just want to look to someone and say, "Do you know what I just said?" And I guarantee you they can't give me 2 of the 12 words I just said to them. So what we have tried to do is get people to engage, people have quality conversations, don't waste people's time, but use people's time efficiently. When it comes to the AI world today, I'm trying to draw these two things together. AI is a form of engagement. It is a different way to engage, and the machine itself is trying to engage with you. In many of these personal assist apps or things like that, the machine is actually trying to have conversation with you in its own way to engage in how would you answer this question? How would you think about this scenario? Which, to me, in a good leadership, someone who runs a big organization, you should not ask a lot of questions during the day that you don't know what the answer is coming back. So, the AI machine is also trying to get in a place where it is helpful to you. It is engaging with you in the way you want to be engaged, so you continuously use it and continue to evolve it as giving you answers or giving you thought-provoking sort of ideas.
If you were starting your career right now in this era of AI, I mean, what decisions would you have made that you didn't make in your actual life? How would your career path have changed, if at all?
So my career started in the dark ages. It did. I started the last big major seismic technical change in the world, pre-internet. So, I remind people that when I first went to work, we did not have the internet. We did not have email. In fact, we had people on the floor on every floor in the office that printed memos, put them in your mailbox to tell you what time to go to a meeting. That's how you got to I mean, you laugh at it, but we're not talking about that long ago. We're talking about the
I'm sorry, I'm not laughing at
No,
you.
you have to. No, you laugh at it because people are talking about this major disruptive technology we're going through. You know what? This is the second or third one I've lived through in my life. So, I remember there was no email, there was no computer, there were phones and assistants and people scheduling meetings, and 35 phone calls later, you could get 5 people together. And then if you wanted to have a floor meeting or a department meeting, someone sat at the mimeograph machine, I'm dating myself, printed memos, threw them in your mailbox, and you went over to say, "Oh, I got to be somewhere at 4 o'clock today." So it's hard to say how I would have started my career differently. I let my career manage itself, and I think in my generation, people were much more of the idea you get a job and you stay there. Which I didn't, but
we were just talking to the CEO of TIAA, and one of the things we talked about is some of the big, great things this technology can bring. But there's also a lot of downsides and a lot of scary downsides. This is a huge disruption. I know you've lived through a few, but this one's moving faster than ever.
If anyone's bored, go back and read the newspaper articles when the automobile was created, when the automobile went in mass production. It's identical. It's dangerous. It's going to kill people. It's going to put everyone out of work. How are we going to deal with this? Think of all those people that shoe horses and clean stalls and do all these things. It's the end of the economy.
But we have the creators of the technology saying those things, right?
You know what? They said it back then. They said the exact same thing, which it's interesting to go back and look at it. It's really interesting to go back when you go through these major technological shifts. Look, they're always scary to adapt. Right? So when you're trying to adapt something new, you're getting out of your comfort zone, and you're always worried about what can go wrong, not what can go right. So we normally, as human beings, approach anything new with a little bit of a negative bias. So, here's the negative of AI, here's the negative, here's the negative, here's the negative. Well, there's a lot of positives. There's an enormous amount of positives. I'm not sitting up here and telling you there's no negatives. I get a lot of the negatives, and we're starting to see them. Look, we're starting to see the issue of water. We're starting to see the issue of electricity prices. These are real fundamental issues. You can't add technology to the grid that consumes massive amount of resources when you're under-resourced as a country. So I get those issues. On the flip side, where we've seen AI have really good returns and huge satisfaction scores is when you put AI into the role of doing what I would call a task. AI is very good at tasks. And by the way, most people don't like a job that is a task. So I'll give you a good example of a task job, one that we've done to ourselves at IBM. We use all of our own AI on ourselves first. We call ourselves Client Zero. So think of a traditional person earlier in their career in a human resources department. They spend an enormous amount of their time taking a request from an employee saying, hey, I'm buying a house, I'm buying a car, I need a mortgage. I need a employment verification letter that says how long I've worked here, what my title is, and what I've earned for the last 3 years. So before AI, you would call somebody, someone would take the message, they take the information down, they would have to go into the computer, find your HR file, pull out all the data, put it in a form, and then send it out when they got around to it. No, seriously. You know, because they had 30 other phone calls like that before you that day. Now we have something called an HR bot. And you know what? You go online, you put in, hey, I'm applying for a mortgage at these 50 banks. Please send them all of my pertinent information. Send, and by the way, the bank has the information in real time. Now, the person looking up those personnel files, they weren't enjoying their job. Right. It was a job where they were trying to get to the next job. You know what? Now we've taken those people that were filling out those, employment verification letters, and we've got them on campus recruiting, because they now have time to do something that's very highly satisfactory for themselves and actually makes us a better company. So there are real opportunities here to get rid of some of these tasks that I always say high turnover, high dissatisfaction, and high error rate.
Right. So there's something interesting happening this afternoon. Our president will be speaking to the Davos crowd. Are you going to be listening in?
Absolutely.
And as someone who used to work for him, how has...
I'll give you a little trivial fact.
Tell me.
The first speech he gave, I guess it's 8 years ago, I wrote that speech.
No way.
When I was in the White House. It was he and I had done the whole Davos trip together. So if you remember the punchline, America strong is not America alone.
Does that message...
And then I followed up with an op-ed, which if you want to go Google it, there was an op-ed the next day for me in either the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal.
Is that a message you think the Trump 2.0 era still abides by?
I think ultimately, yes. I think, look, I was just at a Howard Lutnick event. We were talking about the intertwined global economy we live in and how we as America have a role, but we cannot get to where we want to get without China. We cannot get there without Europe. We cannot get there without other countries. No one in this world is self-sufficient. We all have some interdependencies. I think right now the posture in the Trump administration is to have less interdependencies and to be more self-sufficient. But you can't get there overnight. And even if we made this decision that we were going to try and be America alone, it would take centuries to get there. There's certain things we just don't have. As we're learning, probably most people in this room never had heard of a rare earth before this year. And probably no one ever thought where magnets were made or how magnets were made. All these things that are now becoming more prevalent in our daily lives because the Trump administration is saying, look, we have a rare earth problem. We have a magnet problem. By the way, we have a pharmaceutical problem. And I think a lot more of this, in honesty, came to light in COVID. The big still remaining takeaway for me in COVID was the supply chain and how quickly the supply chain got interrupted and how highly dependent, we in the United States were and still are, on certain things that are imperative to our success, that we are 100% dependent on someone else to ship to us. So, the big issue during COVID was really chips. Really, and you think about it, you didn't see it in the high tech world. You saw it in the low tech world. You saw that, dishwashers and washing machines and toasters. I don't know why toasters have to be smart, but all of those things, they ceased to exist. You could try and go online and buy them, but the delivery lead times were months because they couldn't get the basic chips that they needed to build those things. So then you extrapolate that now into some of the national security issues. When we fire a laser guided missile, which we tend to fire a bunch from every now and then, there's 300 chips in that laser guided missile. You're just blowing up 300 chips at a time. So when you think of how imperative it is to have these things and how dependent we were on the world, I think that really resonated with the Trump administration. I think it resonated with the Biden administration. And that's why there was a lot more of this fundamental view that we need to repatriate, or we need to incentivize the construction and the manufacturing of certain items that are really what I would call essential items. And remember, the CHIPS Act, which was the U.S. government helping subsidize chip manufacturing in the United States, was passed under the Biden administration.
Right. Gary Cohn, IBM Vice Chair.